Welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. This is Mike Higman. We've got Adam Cruz, and also we got Kyle Bennett again with us tonight. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing good. Doing great.
I'm excited about talking some spring food plots a little bit later on. First, I wanted to cover a couple things. First of all, I want to say welcome to everybody that's listening on YouTube. We started publishing our episodes on YouTube, so if you're at one of those places where you want to listen at work and you can't get on one thing or the other, YouTube's another option. For the benefit of everyone, we're not actually videoing anything, so you don't have to see us. It's just going to be audio.
Thank us later.
But yeah, if you guys subscribe to that, that'd be cool. Thanks to everybody that's been liking us on Facebook. We just passed 1,000 likes on there. The Hunting in the South group is continuing to grow, and we got some great content going there. So if you haven't done that yet, go join there. We got a couple new reviews, so thank you to everyone that's been doing that. And I guess let's talk a little bit of hunting. Adam, I know you've been hunting lately. What's been going on with you?
So I got a hunting story. It's a little bit different, and it's a little funny. For anyone that follows us on Instagram, I'll post a story every once in a while about a few gobblers, if I can get that out, living across.
Right, it is a funny story already.
It's I've got a few gobblers.
Tennessee gobbers.
We call them gobbers. And anyways, they've been living across the road, and they never, ever crossed the road to my property, which I own about 6 acres. Make a long story short, I had a weekend where I was going to have about 5 hours to go and hunt and enjoy myself out on some public lands. I had big plans. I was about to head out and go roost one, and literally I walked out on my front porch, and I was like, I'll throw out a hoot. And anyone else that follows us on Instagram again knows I can't hoot, but man, I did, and I just had a gobbler tear loose right beside my house in the woods. So, anyways, I just waited around. Sure enough, he roosted right up there by my house, and I ended up going out that night and setting up a blind in my backyard, quite literally, and got in there. Listen first light, let him gobble first. I ended up kind of like throwing a little gobble at him with a gobble shaker, trying to do a little Jake impersonation, did a little tree yelp, and then I just shut up. Anyways, he gobbled his head off from that limb. Ended up hearing him and a couple of hens going back and forth after he hit the ground. So after I heard those hens, I was like, all right, well, I'll throw a little bit at the hens. I ended up doing just a little bit of purring and a couple more yelps, and again, just kind of shut down. And sure enough, man, 30 minutes later, I look out and 2 hens pop out, and they start heading down this logging road back towards some pastures back there away from me. And I'm like, okay. And then another hen starts coming right at my decoys, and this old girl has about a 7.5-inch beard. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. If no gobblers show up, we're good to go. Well, sure enough, gobbler comes out of the woods. He was next, and he's in full strut. So I'm got my gun on him. I'm waiting. He comes out of full strut into half strut. So I lean down into my gun, and then boom, I shoot. I don't know if I didn't wait until he stuck his head up or what. I mean, he's like at 30, 35 yards. It was pitiful. Didn't even touch him. So gobbler ends up jumping up, kind of doing a little hop skip, kind of figuring out what's going on, going back towards those other 2 hens that were moving away from me, and he was putting. So I was like, well, I'm going to throw out a fighting purr. So I ended up fighting purr. And man, this bearded hen just comes like boiling at me, like her hair's on fire. And a bearded turkey in the state of Tennessee is legal. So, and I've never killed a bearded hen. So I let her have it, and kind of got the monkey off my back this year. I hadn't got to hunt a whole lot, but wish I killed the gobbler. But man, I'm just glad I got a little turkey breast in the refrigerator. We had some family over and that night, and we ate every bit of that turkey in one sitting. So it was absolutely delicious. But anyways, man, it's been a tough turkey season, but I still got another week and a half to go, and looking forward to getting out there a few more times before some baseball games. And how's your season been so far, Mike, or what you been up to these days?
Well, Adam, we can't all be Kyle Bennett hunting in Florida and Mississippi and Texas every year. Some of us just got to hunt the backyard, right?
So you got to go where you can go, man. I had big plans, but sometimes you just sit right where you're at.
My favorite part about when you told me that story is that you told me you woke your wife up when you shot the gun.
As soon as I came through the door, she didn't ask if I killed anything. She goes, "Seriously, you're a Marine and you had to shoot 2 times at a turkey, so, and you woke me up. Thanks."
So I got to use this opportunity. We got to get into some tactics here, Adam. So how exactly do you? What's the best cover for a turkey in the backyard? Did you like hide in one of the bathtubs out there? You got some old broken down cars in your backyard? You hide behind one of those, or what's the strategy?
Man, honestly, I keep a blind back there all year, all during turkey season, just in case some turkeys are roosted back there, or if like during lunch, every day during lunch, I'll walk out there and I'm like, let out a hoot just in case, or I might even throw off a little turkey call and I might run out there to the blind if I get a chance. I don't have a lot of cover right there, but yeah, I mean, I got that blind setting up right there in the edge of the woods, and I ended up putting my decoys. There's a little saddle, like a very, very small, indescript type of saddle in my yard that'll cross over to my neighbors into some woods and into a pasture. And that's right where I put my decoys, because that's where the deer or the turkeys will both just kind of like funnel through. So I know exactly where they're going to come out. I know right down to, 30 yards is a perfect yardage for my shotgun. It gives me a perfect pattern. Shouldn't miss. Like, I don't know what the heck happened.
Did you learn about that saddle in that Mapping Trophy Bucks book you always talk about?
Yes, and I also learned online. I was watching a bunch of other guys talking about hunting off topo maps and how these smaller saddles are really better terrain features in a lot of ways because they're overlooked, and they definitely still do the same thing. Like the animals are still going that route, so definitely works.
Do you happen to remember where online that was?
Facebook group, some random dude.
Some dude
with a mullet, actually.
Whoa.
I'll never forget the guy. I know his name. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to embarrass him, but he's got a really cool mullet.
Yeah. Well, I know you asked me about my season. I got about nothing to say. I have not done much hunting related other than the Down South Hunting podcast. So I'm living vicariously through you and the other guys in the Hunting in South group. What about you, Kyle? You've been doing anything hunting related lately?
Well, unfortunately for me, I had a little bit of a season-ending injury. I threw my back out pretty bad a few weeks back. So I did have some success at the beginning of the season and got to Florida, got to hunt in South Texas. But when time came to come back home and hunt my home farm in Mississippi, that was about the time I screwed my back up. So the past few weeks I have been down. Have not been able to hunt at all, so I did not get to kill a bird on my home farm for the first time in a while. But I can't complain too much. I had some good trips early in the year, but anyways, it kind of stinks to end the season that way, but I'll always have next year, I guess.
Well, I guess we talked to Jacob right before this conversation, and we went kind of long, had a great conversation about spring plots, and got into a lot of details. So we're going to kind of start at the basics and get deeper as we go along. So we better go ahead and jump into that so we don't wear everybody out.
Look forward to it. Let's get going.
All right.
Hey, y'all, before we get into this interview, I want to give you a quick reminder to go check out huntinggeardeals.com. There's a ton of great deals on there right now, and they are the original sponsor of the Down South Hunting podcast. Turkey season's transitioning over into deer season, and also these hunting companies are trying to get rid of their 2017 gear and start moving into 2018. So you should be checking that every single day so you're not missing out on these deals. The other thing is Adam and I just had a really cool interview with Jason Hart, who's the VP of Sales at Nomad Outdoor, another partner of the podcast. And we went over all the new gear that's going to be coming out in July. They've got tons of new camo stuff that you're going to want to hear about. So stay tuned for that. Let's get on this interview.
All right, guys, on the podcast tonight, we have Jacob Womack with Mossy Oak Gamekeepers and Mossy Oak Biologic. Jacob, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, fellas. How about y'all?
I'm doing real good.
Yeah, doing good as well.
Hey, you can't beat it. The weather is warming. and the mushrooms are starting to come out, and the turkeys have flopped all they're going to flop in the South, just about. And man, you can't get any better right now.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about getting into talking some deer stuff. I know we'll be talking turkey too, but I'm ready to make the transition. My turkey season never got going this year, but I'm ready to get into deer. And could you tell us what your position is with Mossy Oak exactly?
Yeah, so I am. I've been with Mossy Oak for about almost 2 years now. I am the ag retail sales manager for Biologic and for Gamekeeper Clothing. Work directly for the one and only Mr. Bobby Cole. So I have that pleasure every day. But so in other words, I if you see Biologic somewhere, if you see Gamekeeper Clothing, I either know about it or had my hands in it somehow.
That's awesome, man. I've got quite a bit of that Gamekeeper stuff. It's pretty quality stuff.
Yeah, it's we really on the Gamekeeper Clothing we tried to go back to our roots of, well built, durable, and man, it is done really well. We are moving right along, with that, and we can't be happier with that right now. So it's done really well for us.
Give us a little bit of background about yourself. Where did you grow up, and how did you kind of get into this outdoor lifestyle?
Yeah, well, so I grew up in kind of northwest Georgia, Cartersville, Georgia. I grew up with a family that loved the outdoors. My dad was, an avid hunter, but he not necessarily, did it every day. He didn't grow up hunting. Once he married my mom's dad absolutely loved hunting and did it since he was a little boy. And more so to feed themselves back then than to, do it for a hobby. So it was, you had to put food on the table back then, and that's what he grew up doing. That was my granddad, and then he passed it on to my dad, and then, my dad kind of passed it on to us. And, I've got 3 older brothers. They all of us are hunters. I mean, that's what we love doing, and that's what we enjoy doing. And, at a young age, I was really interested in the farming aspect of it. Not necessarily, I didn't really know what a deer wildlife farmer was. I had no clue that even existed. But, I came up, and my oldest brother, he actually started with an outdoor company back in the day, and he kind of introduced me to that world. He kind of introduced me to that wildlife world of, this is actually a thing, and actually growing deer and taking care of your herd and taking care of your turkey flocks and all of that. And, it kind of opened my eyes to, man, this is something that I really want to do. That was kind of a passion of mine that I didn't realize I had until I was shown that by my oldest brother. And, I had worked in lawn care and had done that all through high school, and then got out of high school and kept doing that for a little while. And then I went into a couple other things, and then I got a call one day. My oldest brother had actually been filming some stuff with Jeff Foxworthy. My oldest brother's still in the film world, the outdoor production. And he had just filmed some stuff with Jeff Foxworthy, and was like, they said something about looking for a land manager. And my brother was like, look, my brother, he doesn't know anything about this. He has no clue what he's doing. He can run a tractor. He's been running a tractor since he was 7, and he'll work his tail off. So give him a shot. If you don't like him, oh well, fire his butt, and then we'll move on. So, that introduced me into that world, and man, I grew a strong passion for, not necessarily hunting. I honestly, I could go all year and not take an animal as long as I can see that animal out in a field. He's getting the right nutrients. He's getting the right forage that he needs. He's getting native browse. He's getting everything he needs, and he is growing immensely every year. That's what I love. And that's where to this day, I can truly say that I would much rather do that than anything. That's my love now.
Man, I have to agree with you 100%. I found the same kind of transition for me. It's become so much more than just, harvesting the animal. It's being able to really watch it grow and know that you have made the best habitat that it can thrive in. Man, it's really fulfilling.
Yeah, it really is. And, that's what we preach every day in what I do now. And, come full circle. So I worked at Foxworthy Farms for about 4.5 years. I learned a whole lot. I learned everything I could take in. And, we were doing doctorate studies with the University of Georgia. We were doing surveys. We were doing coyote studies. We were doing this. We were doing that. And, and my hands were in all of that, so that helped me. I don't have that 4-year college education, but at the same time, I feel like in that 4.5 years of working at what is known as a premier deer farm in the Southeast, I feel like I got that 4-year education just getting my hands dirty. And I know you guys have had Glenn Garner on before, and, he taught me a ton about this world, and I'm greatly in debt to him for that. And, there were others that helped me along the way. And, in the ag world and food plot world and just all around. So, it's, that was awesome work there, like I say, for 4.5 years. And then, it was kind of a plan that I would stay there for about that long, and then I would move on and kind of manage my own farm. Not my personal farm, but, be the head land manager for another farm. So kind of transitioned, and I actually moved to, just outside of Nashville, and took care of a 2,000 acre farm there. And I was there for about 1.5 years. And, we did a lot of habitat improvement. We did a lot of food plot improvement. And it went really well. And then one day my phone, out of the blue, my phone rang, and it was actually Bobby Cole. And he said, heard a lot about you. I met him in passing one day. He was at Jeff's farm, and I was in the middle of doing something, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Bobby, how you doing?" Kind of went on my way. That was all I'd met him, but he had heard about me and through other people, and he said, we would love to hire you on with Mossy Oak Biologic, and you have a knowledge on food plots. You've gotten your hands dirty, and you kind of know the food plot world, and you've been planting our stuff for 6 years now. So we would love for you to, come in and work with us and teach other people how to do it, and teach other people the responsibility of taking care of your property. And I say it's a responsibility because it is. I feel obligated to make sure that deer herd or that turkey flock or, whatever it is out there, is getting the right nutrition, is getting the right forage, whatever it is. That's what I want to focus on. And, and I love teaching other people that, and it's crazy that from 6.5 years ago until now, well, crap, I guess it's about 8 years now that I've been in this, I learn every day. There's never a time where I don't learn something new, whether it's from guys in the office, whether it's from people outside of the office, phone calls that we get every day at the office. It's just crazy how much you can learn, and just by talking to people, and just by, well, maybe something works in Alabama and it doesn't work in Georgia, or vice versa, or so it's just, I learn every day, and I love what I do. There's no doubt about it. That's number one for me, for sure.
So we're going to be getting into this habitat stuff coming up here, but I got to ask you about working on the Foxworthy farm. Were you doing that about the same time they were filming that Inside and Out TV show?
Actually, I was there on the first day, and I was there until we ended up, we stopped doing it because it just took so much of Jeff's time and so much of our time that it was kind of getting the best of us. But, I was very fortunate to be there in those days, and that was a very, very fun time. Funny story there. I was actually behind the camera when Jeff killed the infamous Will Smith. That was, man, to say that someone killed a 178-inch deer, typical mainframe 8-pointer in Georgia, and I was sitting there watching it happen, it's unheard of, much less in Georgia. And it was something. It really was. It was magical. The timing of it was magical. It was something. And I will never, ever forget that day, for sure.
When you say watching it happen, you mean you were there for the whole thing going down, not that you were like in the tree, right?
Oh, no, I was in the tree.
Oh, you're the short guy.
Yep, I was the short guy.
That is awesome. That is really, really cool.
Guy. Yeah. It was almost like it was meant to be that day. And I know Glenn touched on it when he was on, and I don't want to go on and on about it because I could, but that's man, it's something. It really is. And we had kind of rushed that day and gotten to the stand. We had not had pictures of that deer in the daytime in a couple of weeks, and a little rain actually pushed through, and that rain didn't last but about 10 minutes. And I said, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's go. If anything, we'll see a bunch of deer, because we had just planted a big food plot there, and we, it was growing well, and we had deer moving by there. I knew we did. I just knew he had a chance of being in that area, and the good Lord just happened to put him there in front of us that night and made me the short guy I am, to where I couldn't film Jeff shooting a doe. And I turn around literally 15 yards from us, and because I panned back on the camera and I looked down, and I said, holy crap, Will Smith. And Jeff kind of looked at me and said, what? And I was like, don't move. Will Smith is at 15 yards. Just don't move. And he kind of just barely moved his head, and he saw him, and he went, okay. He was calm as I've ever seen him. I mean, everything worked out perfect that night. It was awesome.
That's really cool. We had Glenn back on episode 20. If anybody that's listening wants to go back and listen to it, so we had Glenn tell that whole story and some more about the property. So we'll kind of move on from that. But I do have one last question with it. What is it like working for Jeff Foxworthy and working on his farm?
Man, he is a class act. He really is, and even to this day, he and I keep in touch. He is just a good dude. He's a good-hearted guy. Funny as all get out. Regardless of if he's on stage or off stage, he is a funny, witty. I mean, you can't get anything past that man. I promise you.
man, he seems like such a good guy and cool guy to work with. I love the work he's been doing with Mossy Oak the past few years with Gamekeepers and really showing how he lives that lifestyle. The Gamekeepers brand that Mossy Oak has developed is such a cool thing, that shows it's not just about hunting, and it's not just about one season. It's about everything that happens in one year that kind of goes toward that outdoor lifestyle. Can you talk about that a little bit, about what does it mean to be a gamekeeper?
There's different interpretations. Everybody's got their own interpretation of what it is to be a gamekeeper. You ask me what it is to be a gamekeeper, and it kind of goes back to what I have a passion for, and it's taking care of the critters that live on that land. Keep it to where the next generation can enjoy it. Keep it to where the generation after that can enjoy it. And that's the main goal. Even if there is a ground squirrel that you want to take care of, do the best you can do to take care of that little ground squirrel. That's what Gamekeeper is to me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your position at Gamekeepers now and kind of what you're up to these days?
My official position is the ag retail sales manager. That's for the Gamekeeper clothing. Personally, I travel a lot. I travel to trade shows. I travel to hunters' nights out. So I travel to stores that have, a hunter's night that, is all about food plotting. It's all about land management and the best way I know to take care of the property, the best way I know to plant and to constantly grow and supply food and supply native browse and to supply all of this stuff for your critters on your property. And that's the number one goal for all of us at Gamekeeper.
Are y'all utilizing video or YouTube or anything like that to get that education out there to other hunters and other land managers? Is that something y'all might plan on doing in the future?
Absolutely. We actually have a Gamekeeper television show.
It's on Pursuit, right?
Pursuit. Yeah, it's on the Pursuit channel. That's a show that airs every week. And everybody that's on that show is land managers. Everybody that's on that show, it may be 100 acres, it may be 5,000 acres, but everybody has that same goal in mind and to become a better gamekeeper. And that's what their goal is to teach people how to become a better gamekeeper. We also have a quarterly magazine called the Gamekeeper magazine. That comes out. You get 4 issues a year. It's honestly, for what it is cheap to do. It's $19.99 for a year subscription. If you want to become a Gamekeeper member, it's like $40. To become a member, you get a little discount on seed on our biologic site, as well as you get a discount on clothing. If you just do the subscription, you get 4 magazines a year, and it does the same thing. I could beat it till it's dead. Everything that we do is teaching the next generation or teaching the generation now how to better their property. There's articles in there from how to manage a fish pond to how to manage your native browse. And that's the biggest tool that we've got are those two things, is the Gamekeeper television show and the Gamekeeper magazine.
Cool. So if somebody's interested in signing up for that, where do they go to?
Yeah, you can go on to gamekeepersclub.com and then click on magazine subscription, and it'll take you right into that. And like I say, or if you don't have a way of doing that, you can call into our office. I'll throw that number out there. Just don't call it Kyle all the time just because I give you the number. But it is 662-495-9292. It asks for me, ask for anybody in the Gamekeeper office can help you with getting signed up for that magazine. It's pretty simple, and you don't have to do anything. All you need is a card number, and we can put you on the list, and you'll start with the next issue that comes out, which now, if you sign up now, the next issue actually comes out June 1. That'll be the summer issue.
All right. So like we talked earlier, turkey season's wrapping up and we're ready to start thinking deer. And what we wanted to talk about tonight is spring food plots. Could you start out by just telling us some of the benefits of planning spring food plots, why somebody might be interested in doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing on spring food plots, your deer are in need of that protein this time of year. They're growing antlers, they're growing little ones, they're, everything is, what they need right now is that high protein, that, lots of forage, lots of browse, lots of, just food. I mean, they need it to sustain their energy. They need it to sustain, their milking. They need it to grow antlers. Spring is one of the most important things in maintaining your herd health. That has kind of started evolving over the years of people realizing, okay, well, deer are starting to grow antlers. Deer are taking care of little ones. They're, turkeys, poults are coming out. Everything happens in the spring. And that's the number one time of getting as much as you can get to your herd, as much as you can get to your flock is right now. And, if you can plant anywhere from, like we've got Lab, we've got a product called Spring Protein Pea. We've got, some forage beans. We've got just about anything that you could think of, for those springtime plantings. Winter gets harsh on them and you do need that winter stuff, but spring is when they're growing.
So I'm brand new to this. I've never planted a food plot. I want to start planting food plots. What are some of the first things that I need to do in order to get my soil ready and to pick what I can actually put in the ground?
The first thing you need to do is a soil test. Sorry. That's number one. I don't care if it's an acre. I don't care if it's a quarter of an acre. Get a soil test. Because if your soil is so poor that it's not going to grow anything, you're just throwing money into the ground. That's the biggest thing for anybody that's just getting in this world. If you just cleared 2-acre plot that was covered in trees, your soil is not going to be great because those trees over the last 50 years have been sucking every bit of nutrients out of that ground that it can. And that's why your trees are so hardy. That's why they look so good. That's why they're dropping acorns. That's why your pine trees are growing 6 foot a year, because they're sucking all the nutrients out of the ground. So the first thing that I would suggest to anybody that's getting into the food plot world is get a soil sample. Take it down to your local ag store. Take it down to your local farmer's extension or whatever it may be. A lot of places do soil samples. We actually offer a soil sample on plantbiologic.com. All you have to do is go in, click soil sample, and it'll pull up, a sheet. You fill the sheet out. It tells you where to send it. It sends it to our lab in Memphis, and they test your dirt for you. You tell them what you're planning on planting there, and they're going to tell you the recommended rates of what to fertilize, how much lime, how much NP and K. They're going to tell you, they're going to break it all down for that one specific plant. So if you say, I want to plant lab in this area, you write it in there, and then they come back and they tell you exactly what you need to plant lab and for your lab to do well. And don't get frustrated when it comes up and you see 10 tons of lime to the acre. It happens sometimes because we have very acidic soils in the South. That is no doubt, we have very acidic soils. We've got a ton of pine trees that's what happens. And so that's the number one thing is that I tell everybody is just just get that soil sample. You can't go wrong with that.
I think every time I hear somebody talk about food plots and that kind of stuff, the first thing they always say is get a soil sample. But then either when I'm talking to somebody in person or on a message board or something along those lines, I hear people say all the time that, oh, their soil's fine and they always plant stuff and they don't have any problems. I mean, what are the chances are somebody that the soil's fine? I mean, is it crazy that they're not getting a soil sample ever, or if it's working out, it's fine?
It's crazy that you don't get a soil sample. If your stuff is doing fine and it's doing okay to your standards, just think what it could do if your soil was right. Just think, okay, maybe I am only 500 pounds to the acre of lime. Okay, well, you're at a 6.5 pH right now. If you bump it up to a 7, just think you could get more forage out of that one plant just because you're at a neutral pH. Or you could get more forage out of that plant just because your potash was a little low. You added a little potash or whatever it is. If your soil is a great soil and it's a black dirt, and I promise you're still going to need something. If you don't, consider yourself lucky because it doesn't happen much.
My understanding too is that if your pH is off, the plant may grow, but it can't even use a lot of the fertilizer that's in the soil. The acidity of the soil actually blocks some of the nutrients from getting up into the plant. Is that right?
Yes, that's 100% correct. That is, so what the pH does, if your pH is off, that pH, if you are at an even pH, that allows your soil to break down and for the root system to pull all the nutrients out of the dirt. If your pH is low, it doesn't allow your soils to really break down how they're supposed to, and your root systems are going to be scrambling to get what they can out of that dirt. So if you've got that level pH and it's like a free for all, and it's getting all the nutrients it can get, and you're going to better yourself. You're going to better your herd by producing that more forage. Yes, like you say, it's okay if it's 5.5 pH. My soil is just not going to allow itself to let go of that nutrients like it would if it was a 7 pH, a neutral pH.
And that's going to make a difference on what plants you plant as well. Like, because you don't necessarily have to get the pH all the way up to 7. You could plant different plants that can handle that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lab is a really good one for poorer soils. Lab is grown. The Lab that we get is actually grown in Australia. It's not a great soil in Australia. These guys, they have harsh summers. So Lab has kind of conditioned itself, and over the years, they have made Lab to where it really just, it can do well in poorer soils because of that reason. And so that's why we push a lot of people to Lab that has a poorer soil and maybe not the means of getting, that 10 tons of lime, and I'm over exaggerating on the 10 tons. Okay, maybe it's 5 tons of lime to the acre. Those guys that don't have the means to do that, that's fine. Just find that plant that can take a little less on a pH, or, Lab's a good one. Our spring protein P is a good one. You want to be a little more towards neutral, and Lab, you can go at a 5, and you're going to get decent growth. You're not going to get full potential, but you're going to still get pretty good growth out of that. The protein P, you want to be around a 6, 6.5, maybe a little lower, and you'll still be fine. But your soybeans and stuff like that, they're still in that range of a 6 to a 6.5. You'll still be fine. You definitely don't have to get that neutral pH. It's hard to achieve, but once you get it, you'll notice a big difference.
So, Jacob, we plant some spring food plots on my farm in South Mississippi, and we kind of have two categories. We've got, stuff that we plant in the spring, and then we've got clover that's left over from the fall that we kind of maintain and manage into the springtime.
The biggest thing in the spring is, like I say, you're trying to push that nutrients to your deer, and you've got your stuff that you're going to plant in the spring, and then like you said, you got your stuff that's coming back from that you planted in fall of last year, like your clovers and all of that. Clover habitat is a huge thing for the South. We've got it everywhere. You can look on the side of the road and you've got clover. Clover is a really easy tool to supply a lot of forage for your herd. It's a really high in protein, really low maintenance if you really look at it, and it's just a simple thing that continues to come back for 5 to 6 to 7 to 10 years if you continue to maintain it. And when I say maintain it, that's keeping your weed pressure down in your clover. Keeping your clover mowed. Don't let it get just out of hand where it's thigh high and your deer aren't getting anything out of it. What we've seen is when clover goes to flower, it actually puts a little bitter taste into the clover. So deer tend to start laying off of it. But you also have to look at when it goes to flower, your turkeys, that's what your turkeys are coming in. All the little insects that are getting the pollen and they're good out of that flower. That's what your turkeys are bugging on. So you have to really, you'll always have some tender growth in there. Just don't let your clover get so out of hand to where it's flowering and it's kind of taking over everything else to where you're not getting new growth. Clover continues to reproduce. And, if you keep that weed pressure down, if you keep your grasses out, if you keep your broadleafs out, that's the biggest deal on clover. And I say it's very low maintenance compared to a row crop or a bean or anything like that. Clover is pretty easy. That's the biggest thing for me is it's a very simple tool. If you don't have, huge area and you don't have a whole lot of time to put into it, clover is a pretty easy plant to get established.
Yeah, I hear you. In fact, I just mowed some of our clover food plots this past weekend. How many times during the spring or the summertime do you think that clover needs to be mowed in the South?
It all depends on how much rain you get and how much how hot it gets in the front end. You typically you're going to mow it pretty soon after that initial spring jump, and then you can come in after that spring jump. Just make sure your weed pressure is down, and then let it grow for a little while. Let it do its thing for a month, maybe 2 months, and then come in and cut it again. And, I tend to say usually by that time, it's getting so hot that your clover is kind of struggling. Especially the Ladonna clovers and stuff like that. They are heat tolerant to a certain extent. We all know in the South, it gets hot and it gets hot quick. So that, it just keep a close eye on your clover and, just like I said, don't let it get out of hand. That's the last thing you want to do is let it get so tall that nothing's in there. That's the last thing you want to do.
My deer do a pretty good job of keeping it from getting out of hand.
Yeah, that is a plus. If you do have a higher deer density or a smaller plot, deer usually do a pretty good job of knocking it down for you to keep that maintenance even lower.
Hey, aren't there some clover varieties that'll reseed if you let them flower out? I know not all of them do that, but are there some it's better to let them do that so they'll reseed?
Yeah, there are definitely some that do. Most all of them do. Most all of them will reseed themselves if you let them flower. There are some varieties that do not, but again, clover is reseeding once it flowers. Some of it takes it to dry and actually fall. But it doesn't matter if you cut it, you're still going to get a reseed off of what flowers were there, or, looking long term, your clover is going to last. And if you come back and reseed it about every 3 years yourself, you're never going to have to really let it get to that stage. That's kind of going back to, you want to make sure that your deer and your turkey are utilizing that clover, and at the same time, you don't want to let it get out of hand and come back and cause problems in the long run.
All right, Jacob, let's talk a little bit about the warm season stuff, the stuff that we would be planting this time of year in the South. I think May, is a good time, at least in the deep South, to start planting stuff like soybeans and stuff that's, a high tonnage food source for deer. A lot of people talk about soybeans and cowpeas, and you mentioned lab. These are all legumes, and they grow, basically. They produce a high amount of tonnage. So what are some advantages to using those in some food plots?
One, it replenishes your nitrogen in your soil. That is a big thing for a lot of the legumes. And again, that goes back to being a gamekeeper. You're not just helping your herd, you're helping your dirt. Planting, the labs and the soybeans and the protein peas, and even if you wanted to plant some sunflowers for dove or sorghum for dove or whatever it is, that other than the sunflowers and sorghum, everything that I mentioned is a high forage content. And the forage this time of year is what your deer are getting their nutrients out of. A lot of people say, well, my beans didn't go to pod. Well, my beans didn't do this. My beans didn't do that. Well, did your beans get green? Did your beans grow leaves? Did your beans, did they come up out of the ground enough to where the deer were nipping on them? And they say, well, yeah, well, that's what you want. Your beans don't have to go to pod for the deer to get the good out of them. That's, if they do, then that pod's going to bust, and they're going to drop seed on the ground, and your turkeys and deer and whatever else is going to come in there and eat those beans off the ground more than likely. But going back to the tonnage, the more tonnage you can put in front of a deer this time of year, the better off you are, because that's, again, a crucial time of year for your deer herd and for your poults and for your, I don't know what mating season of ground squirrels are, but hey, it may be in the spring too. We never know. So, but it goes back to, you're putting a ton of forage in front of these deer, and you're giving them the nutrients that they need to recover from that harsh winter, or to recover from, rut, or your poults have been run around. Not your poults, but your hens and turkeys have been running around for a month trying to get them some loving. And, everything's kind of in a recovery stage, and the more forage you can put in front of them, the more nutrients they get. And that's the biggest tool for you this time of year, is in those beans and in the lab and protein peas and whatever it may be that you're planting.
And these, these legumes that we're talking about, or the soybeans, these aren't like a crop soybean like people are planting for production. Most of these are like a forage bean that puts more energy into actual like plant, like in leaf growth, like rather than putting into pod production.
That's right. A forage soybean is for what it is. I mean, for the name of it, it is a forage, and you're 100% right. They're going to grow taller. They're going to grow more. They're going to grow leafier. They're going to grow everything. They put all their energy into growing that forage. And you may get a little bean on the end of it. Great. But if not, it's okay. It really is okay because your deer are still getting that nutrients. You know, and I tell people a lot of times, if you have a smaller acreage, and you're only getting stubble out of the ground, or you're only getting, you know, a foot of growth or whatever it is, put a seclusion cage. Take a little hog wire cage and put it in a circle out in the middle of your food plot to where you can see what it would have grown into before your deer came in and got all the nutrients out of it. Because it doesn't matter if it throws a bean. It matters that the deer are eating the green. The deer are eating that forage. The deer are still getting what they need to get out of that plant, even if it grows a foot tall.
Is there is there anything that you can plant, like maybe some stuff you could mix together that would benefit, like not only the deer in the summertime, but it might also be something like you could dove hunt over, or something that you could hunt later in the fall?
Yeah, we've actually got a mix called the Spring Protein Pea Plus, which that consists of an iron and clay pea, a mung bean, which is a new one for us, and then sorghum and sunflower. And what that allows it all to do, you're getting the iron and clay pea. Iron and clay pea, they usually hit out of the ground. We all know that. We've all planted iron and clay peas, and they hit those as soon as them little suckers come up. What we've noticed in the mung bean is that they tend to stay off of that until it actually throws a pod on it. For what reason? I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you. But that's what I can see and what we have seen on multiple properties of kind of how they've done that. So you've got two different succession rates there. You got a really early stage in that iron and clay pea, and then you're going to have a later season stage in the mung bean. And then to add to that, you've got the sunflower and the grain sorghum, which are going to feed your dove, and you'll be able to dove hunt over it. So that's kind of a well mixed mixture that we've just come out with this year, that, you know, you're kind of getting all the good for multiple things out of that one bag.
All right, cool. So we've got, I'm sure, a ton of listeners that are part of timber leases, you know, all across the South, where, you know, they might have some logging ramps where they can put some food plots on, or even, let's say, somebody that's got 40 acres they can work on, you know, a brand new piece of property. If that person's got no equipment at all, what's kind of the minimum stuff that you would recommend they start out with?
So, you know, the biggest thing, you know, I've been a part of these timber leases. I've been a part of, you know, only having 100 acres to hunt, or 20 acres to hunt, you know, and the biggest tool, I guess, for me is find something that, one, especially if it's a new lease, that's kind of a, you know, if it's a new lease, you kind of need to break the ground, because it's going to be, especially on a timber lease, that ground is going to be so hard because of all the traffic that it's seen over the years, especially because a lot of places are loading docks where they're already cleared out. And just think, every 18-wheeler that takes a load of timber out of there has backed his butt up in that loading dock at one point. Every skidder that has pulled logs into that place has backed his butt up in there at one point. So, you know, that ground is so hard that, you know, I prefer to kind of break it up that first couple of years. And then after that, you can see if, you know, if the ground's broken up enough to where you can come in and, no-till or whatever it may be. But to answer your question on the front end, if I had a 30-acre place, you can get by with a four-wheeler and some kind of drag disc or some kind of, honestly, I'm not very fluent on the smaller disc stuff because I haven't done it much, but there are things out there that you can attach to your four-wheeler or attach to your UTV or whatever it is that you can pull around there and just break the ground a little bit just to allow that water to penetrate the ground. Because if you don't and you try to plant something on it, all that water is going to do is just wash off and wash all the seed with it. If you're not stopping it somehow and you're not letting it penetrate the ground, then it's just going off into the woods, and then it slows down because you still got tree roots and you still got a lot of stuff out there to stop it.
So if you're not going to go with the four-wheeler, maybe you're going to step up to a little bit to a tractor. Do you have any advice as far as what somebody should look for in a tractor? Even let's say they're going to buy a used tractor or something instead of a four-wheeler. Or is there like a certain size or certain things they should look for on a tractor?
I mean, honestly, you can get by with a little 50-horse tractor or a 25-horse tractor or whatever it is. If it's, I mean, you can get by with anything small like that. They've got attachments for every piece of equipment out there. Of course, if you're going to try to go in and rip the ground up and do this and do that, then you're going to need a little bigger tractor. But for your smaller, what I consider a weekend warrior, look at a little 50-horse tractor with a 3-point hitch on it that you can lift stuff off the ground, and you got a little hydraulic pressure to mash it down when you need it. And it, like I say, as long as you're breaking that dirt a little bit in the first couple of years, it helps a whole lot. And then plant your, if you have soybeans or if you have corn or whatever it is, that's also going to help you break that dirt up. Soybeans tend to kind of break the top layers up to a really fine, you can go in after, if you've got a farmer down the road, and he plants a cornfield one year, and then they come back and plow it the next year. Go look at it the first time they plow it. It's real cloddy. It's real gnarly dirt. All right. And then when you come back, say they plant soybeans the next year, come back after the first time they planted after they, or first time they plow it after they harvest those soybeans off of it the following year, and see how clean that dirt is. See how it's not very cloddy. Soybeans really help that ground break up, and it's got the roots in it just kind of spread out, and they help your soil a lot.
So, Jacob, I know I'm kind of hauling you out into some treacherous waters here, so you just have to bear with me. But I've heard guys say they would rather give up, like, if money for money, they'd rather give up like 10 horsepower to get a 4-wheel drive tractor as opposed to 2-wheel drive. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you haul me out to pasture on this one. It depends on, again, what you're doing. I've seen 2-wheel drive tractors do just as much as a 4-wheel drive tractor. I've also seen 4-wheel drive tractors do a lot more than a 2-wheel drive tractor. You can't, man, if you can find a 4-wheel drive tractor for $100 more than you can find a 2-wheel drive tractor, you dang right, I'm going to get a 4-wheel drive tractor. But, if it's a couple $1,000s more for a 4-wheel drive tractor compared to a 2-wheel drive tractor, I don't think there's that much of a difference. But in saying that, if you're on a big, good size lease that you're planning on ripping at some point, or you're planning on getting a 10-foot Hera disc out there, or you're planning on chisel plowing or something like that, 4-wheel drive tractor all day. That's my 2 cents. You can agree or disagree with that. I promise you, I've seen it work both ways.
Jacob, so, along with the spring planning for the benefit of the wildlife, another thing that happens this time of year is people start putting mineral supplements out. People say that it helps for antler growth. It can also help the lactation of the does. Minerals are not legal everywhere in every state, so make sure you check with your regs to make sure you can actually put them out. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You are trying to, if my native browse or if my forage that I've got growing in a field is, if my fields are already high in calcium, then I don't need a mineral that's high in calcium because they're already getting that out of the fields. Or if it's high in zinc, I don't need that in a mineral because they're getting it out of the fields. So you try to look, and again, this goes back to soil test. Look at your soils, and if it's consistently low in a zinc or consistently low in a calcium or whatever it may be low in, that's the mineral that you need to be finding. That's where you're helping balance those deer out. Deer have a pH too. They have to be balanced to grow a higher or to grow bigger antlers, to grow their babies, to lactate. They have to have that neutral pH to do that. So you have to supply them with what they're lacking out of their soils.
That's true. And I've also heard that, when bucks are growing antlers, they can actually mine phosphorus and calcium out of their skeletal system to put toward antler growth. So they need to replenish those, as much as possible during the summertime while they're really focusing on antlers.
Yep. You are correct. That's look at what your soil is lacking in. Look at, you're always going to need some calcium, and you're always going to need some of that. But really focus on what your soil is missing, and that's the mineral that you need to look at getting. If you see a super high 90% sodium, it means you're going to be low in everything else. So just know that and really study those ingredients in your minerals, because that makes a difference. They get a lot of minerals out of their ground. That's fact. They've been doing it for deer have been getting minerals out of the ground for years. We're just trying to help them get more of what they need or are lacking in.
I also like to use the minerals in the summertime because it's a great place to stick a trail camera. You can get some really cool pictures of some deer in front of those mineral blocks.
Absolutely. I mean, that's when I was at Jeff's 90% of the summer. That's where we took surveys. That's where your deer are coming to, because again, they need that mineral, and that helps them balance themselves out. And so, and they know where they're at. That kind of goes along the lines of, if you're going to do a protein feed site, and you hear different, I need one per 100, or I need one per 50, or I need one per 25 acres, or whatever it is. If you only have a 25 acre place, put one in the middle of that sucker, put protein feed in it, and then put a mineral block right next to it. And then if you have a 3,000 acre place, we put them every 100 acres. So we had 30 feeders on a 3,000 acre farm, and cost is huge in that. And that's why you go back to growing as much as you can grow out of the ground, because cost is huge in feeding these deer, especially if you have a huge deer density like we had at Jeff's farm. I mean, we were going through about 3 tons of feed every 4 days.
Jacob, I know you've been careful about not just coming on and sounding like a sales pitch the whole time, but do you have some biologic products as far as the minerals go that you can tell us about?
So we do have BioRock, which is a Himalayan rock salt. It's mined straight out of the Himalayas. I mean, it's a natural block that comes straight out of the ground. It gets shipped here, and what we've seen is it's not only higher in the sodium, but it's higher in everything else. You know, it's got more zinc, it's got more calcium, it's got more copper, it's got more this. We have really, I promise you, we wouldn't go to the Himalayas just to get another rock salt that you can mine in Utah, because it's not cheap to get it here. I promise. So, you know, we've got the bio rocks. Those are in, you know, Walmarts. They're in Tractor Supplies. They're in local, you know, farm and feed places that carry biologic. And if they're not there, tell them they better have it. And you tell them they call me, and I'll get it to them. I promise.
Isn't one of the best things about those natural rocks too that they have a lot of the trace minerals that you wouldn't necessarily put into like a salt block or something that, you know, is in a bag or something like that, you know, naturally it has a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily put in there, but the deer are going to get out of nature?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's got a lot of natural minerals that we can't make. I mean, that's just fact. You know, we can't make everything. We can make a lot, and we can make good minerals, but we can't make what the good Lord makes.
Probably a lot of stuff I can't pronounce.
I know there's a lot of stuff that I can't pronounce. You're probably a little smarter than I am, so.
We obviously haven't talked long enough yet. So I want to kind of jump back to our scenario we were talking about earlier with the timber lease. We talked about it a little bit with, you know, getting a tractor to break things up. But what we wanted to do is kind of go through some scenarios. And, you know, being from Florida, tons and tons of guys from here love to head up to Georgia because there's more hunting property and more deer and stuff up there. And I know obviously the guys from Georgia are there. And I imagine, you know, I've been on leases in Alabama and they're similar. And a lot of it's like a clay soil. Pine trees everywhere, so real acidic. Could you kind of walk us through what might be beneficial on a property like that for a spring food plot?
Yeah, there is no might be acidic and might be clay in the state of Georgia, because there's some clay. I don't care if you're in South Georgia, there's some clay mixed in with that sandy loam, I promise. And it's going to be acidic because of pine trees, but regardless of if you have a 100-acre lease or a 30-acre lease, you know, getting into those smaller leases, it's always good to plant clover because it supplies so much forage, you know, into the later months of spring and summer, you know, and then even on, again, I'm not trying to sell everything here, but we've got a non-typical clover. It's called non-typical clover. We're actually the proprietary brand of that clover, that type of clover in the U.S. And kind of a backstory on that. When I was at Foxworthy's, we were the test farm for that clover. And Bobby sent me a 50-pound bag and said, "Hey, test this out, see if it works. Let me know what you think." Okay, great. I pulled that clover in. All I knew was it was a clover. That's all I knew. I planted it in one of my okay fields. You know, that's got a pretty good deer density in that area. And I knew it would have a lot of traffic just to see, you know, if deer were eating it, if not eating it. So I pulled it in and planted it that fall, and then came back. You know, you get a little growth depending on how your weather plays out. You may get some, you may not get some. It's not a big deal if you don't, because that clover seed can sit in the ground for months, and then it's going to come on in the spring and do really well. And that clover, that particular clover, it came on in the spring, and it was the greenest, lushest, biggest forage clover I have ever seen. And I picked up the phone and I called and I said, all right, what's the name of it? Where can I get it? And what did you send me? And Bobby said, it doesn't have a name. You can't buy it yet, and don't worry about it. So in saying that, I mean, the smaller places, go towards that clover. I like to plant on like forage soybeans, lab, protein peas. I like to plant anywhere from 2 acres and bigger, because you get so much browse in there that in a day on an acre, it's gone, and you won't get anything else out of it. Yeah, those 10 deer that ate that acre, they're going to be doing good, but the other 20 deer on that square mile didn't get any of it. So I like to say, if you can plant 2 acres or more on a soybean or a iron and clay pea or something like that, I would definitely, if I had 2 acres or more, I would do something like that. But if I had 2 acres or less, I would do a clover, because you're getting more forage out of it, and it takes a lot for those deer to eat all that clover.
I actually planted some of that non-typical clover from Biologic on my place this past fall in 2 separate food plots, and it did pretty well this fall, but it has absolutely exploded this spring. Like it's pretty incredible to see.
Yeah, it's something. And if you notice, Kyle, it's a lot larger than most white Ladina clovers.
Right. It seems to put out a lot more stems also.
Yeah, 100%. And from tests that we've done in years past, and let me remind you guys, with Biologic, I can't speak about everybody else because I don't know. I know some companies do some testing, and I know that a lot of people test their products. But I can speak on Biologic's behalf. We test products for at least 5 years before we put it into a bag. And that's not just in the South. That's not just in the North. That's not just, we spread it over the U.S. to where we've got guys in California. We've got guys in New York. We've got guys in Iowa. We've got guys in Florida. And of course, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. We've got guys spread out all over that we know plant this stuff and they do it right, to where we can get a good, idea of how it's going to react and what territories. The biggest thing is we put the time and the effort into putting great seed in all of our bags. In that clover, it's about double the tonnage per acre than a regular white Ladina clover. A non-typical clover has double the tonnage per acre than a regular white Ladina.
So I guess I'm going to be selfish here for a minute, and I'll ask you about my property, or my dad's property, basically. He's got some land up in North Florida, and I don't have any of that clay from Georgia. It's basically sand.
Yeah.
And we've done soil tests, so I've added lime and that kind of stuff. But the biggest problem I have is it gets so hot so quick here. I mean, wait until May. I mean, maybe I'm too late to do something in the spring. But on properties like that, do you have customers that have had success planting stuff in the spring, or should I just focus mostly in the fall? What would you say for an area like that?
No, absolutely. I mean, we've had customers that have had really good success in the spring. Yeah, you can plant a little earlier in Florida because of the temperate. The climate down there is it's going to get a little hotter, a little quicker, a lot hotter, a lot quicker in most cases. And, that soil down there, it's a very sandy soil. Sometimes it's hard to grow in sandy soil, but there are soil conditioners, there are lime, there's so many ways that you can make that sandier soil to where it's a pretty decent soil. You can go to local co-ops or whatever. They're probably going to have a soil conditioner that will help that that sand get some traction. A lot of times what I see in sandier soil is you lose water really quick because it goes away. There's no hard pan there to stop it, and there's no clay to slow it down. So you lose water really quick on that sandier soil. So in saying that, yeah, there are ways to help build that soil to where it will slow that water down. It'll hold that water a little better than just planting it over sand and seeing how it does. Plant it a little earlier, get a soil conditioner that could help you in that, or, whatever it is, just do a little research in your area of, and I'm not just talking to y'all, but everybody, just do a little research in your area on what works best. There's always, I could tell you what works best in Georgia. I could tell you what works best in Mississippi, Alabama. But if you're in North Alabama, there may be something that works a little better than South Alabama. Or if you're in Middle Alabama, maybe something that works better in South Alabama. So just do a little research. Talk to some guys that have been planting these food plots for 20 years. They probably got a pretty good grasp on how to grow and establish a good food plot.
Is there something that I could plant there that's going to really help the soil going into the fall, as far as like helping nutrients get in there, maybe holding moisture and just kind of creating better soil for the fall?
Yeah, any legumes, you're going to better your soil because you're replacing your nitrogen in there.
Jacob, I've got another prescriptive question for you. So my property is in South Mississippi. We've got pretty fertile soil. We're only a few miles outside of the river. But one problem that we have is an incredibly high deer density. We've got tons of deer. And so a big problem we face, even though we've got quite a few acres of food plots, is they get completely hammered. In your opinion, what are some of the food plot forages, or maybe some of the biologic products that can handle browse pressure the best in the summertime?
Lab is probably number one because it continues to grow. If you can get it past that 3-leaf stage, they can't catch it because it grows so fast that it's crazy. And I keep saying lab, and I keep saying protein P. Well, if you don't know, lab is, like I said earlier, it's a product that comes out of Australia. These guys have developed that stuff to where it's just stupid drought resistant, and it takes a lot of browse pressure. And like I said just a minute ago, if you can get it past that 3-leaf stage, it's pretty deadly. It's a good product. And again, going back to the spring protein pea, you're going to have that early iron and clay pea where they're going to eat it, nip it out of the ground pretty fast. And then what we have seen, and actually I've got a farm a buddy of mine has in around Jackson, Mississippi, that he planted the protein peas last year in about a 2-acre field. And he noticed that they ate the iron and clay pea early, and then they hit the mung bean after it threw a pod. Well, now this year he's going to do about a 25-acre field of the protein pea because he was so impressed with how it stood against the deer browse pressure.
25 acres, that's no joke.
No, he doesn't play.
Yeah.
He does not play with his. I mean, he is the epitome of a gamekeeper. He is 365. He does, everything that he can do, and he consistently shoots mature deer. And you'll never hear me say a man shoots a big deer every year, because a 2-year-old can be a big deer. I've seen it. I've seen a 140-inch 2-year-old.
I'd shoot a 140-inch 2-year-old.
Yeah, that's why you won't ever have mature deer on your place.
Yeah.
You will always hear me say a man that shoots mature deer is a better man that shoots big deer.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that for sure.
One quick question on that lab. Is that something that sticks around into archery season as well, so you can hunt that early season from the spring?
Yeah, so it's going to stick around. I mean, it's going to run its course about like a soybean does. It's going to dry out. It may take a little longer for it to dry out than a soybean. Soybean grows like a bush. Lab grows like a vine. So it tends to hold a little greener, a little longer because it's so gnarly in there, that it, it's not seeing the sun like a soybean would under those first couple layers.
All right, cool. Well, I tell you what, I feel like we kind of went through spring plots 101 and 201. We might have hit even some 301 there, some stuff over my head. So
graduate level spring food plotting.
I really appreciate you coming on, Jacob, and sharing all this info for us. And I look forward to having some more Gamekeeper guys on in the future.
Absolutely. And hopefully the next guy we can have on or you guys will have on is Austin Delano. He is by far 150 times smarter than I ever thought about being on this stuff. He is a guru when it comes to food plots. He's our product development guy. I'm telling you, this dude knows food plots. I know a little. He knows a lot. He has forgotten more than I know about food plots. So Austin, hopefully you guys can get him on at a later date, and man, you could really pick his brain, and he would learn everybody.
Well, we've enjoyed just learning from you tonight, so appreciate you coming on, Jacob.
Yeah, guys, I appreciate it. And again, if I can ever help anybody out there listening with biologic seed, or find a dealer close to you, or if there's not a dealer close to you, go nudge old Tim down at the co-op and tell him, hey man, you better have some of this biologic seed pretty soon.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, and have a great night.
All right. Thanks again, Jacob.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, before I sign off, I just want to thank everybody for listening. We could not do this without your support. And if this is something you enjoy, we would really appreciate it if you would share this. It would help us very, very bigly. And also, don't forget our interview coming up with Jason Hart. You're not going to want to miss that. We're out down south.